10 Strange Deaths. Fulfilling prophecy. The Trojan War was a legendary conflict in Greek mythology that occurred around the 12th or 13th century before Christ. The Achaeans, also called Greeks, waged the war against the city of Troy after the Prince of Troy, Paris, took Helen from her husband, Menelaus, king of Sparta. To get Helen back and restore his honor, Menelaus sought help from his allies. In this way, the Trojan War was waged. The Greek troops sailed and reached shore near the city of Troy. An oracle named Thetis had prophesied that the first Greek to set feet on the land after stepping off a ship in the Trojan War would be the first to die. When Greek ships reached shore, no one from the Greek army dared to land, fearing death in the Trojan War. After waiting a few days on the ship, the legendary Odysseus threw his shield on the beach and jumped upon it. It tricked Protesilaus. He followed Odysseus, considering he was the second man after Odysseus who had set his feet on the shore. In reality, Protesilaus was the first man whose feet touched shore. Later on, he was slain in the Trojan War by its hero, Hector. Killed by a tortoise. Aeschylus was an ancient Greek tragedy playwright. The Roman author Pliny says that Aeschylus was told by an oracle that he would be killed by a falling object. He was so scared of the prophecy that he used to spend a lot of time outdoors and in open spaces to avoid it. In 458 before Christ, he was sitting in an open place when an eagle dropped a tortoise on his head, killing him instantly at the age of 67. The eagle is said to have mistaken his baldness for a rock and tried to use it to crack the shell of its prey. Ironically, Aeschylus was known as the father of tragedy for his work in theatrical Greek tragedies. Aeschylus's work was so respected by the Athenians that after his death, his were the only tragedies allowed to be restaged in subsequent competitions. A fiery end for a god claimant. Empedocles was a Greek philosopher. At the age of 60, he threw himself into the active volcano of Mount Etna on the island of Sicily. According to legend, he committed suicide to prove to his disciples that he had become a god and therefore no longer mortal, and he would survive unharmed. In reality, his death proved that he wasn't immortal physically, but he is remembered even today as a large underwater volcano off the coast of Sicily that was named Empedocles in 2006. A man of words. According to an ancient Greek historian, Diodorus Siculus, the Greek lawgiver Charondas from Sicily issued a law that anyone who brought weapons into the assembly must be put to death. One day, he arrived at the assembly seeking help to defeat some brigands in the countryside, but with a knife still attached to his belt. He had forgotten about the knife. In order to uphold his law, he committed suicide in 612 before Christ. Sacred blood. The Abbasid Caliphate reigned for 500 years, from 750 to 1258 Christian era. It saw a total of 37 caliphs. They ruled from Baghdad, Iraq. The last Abbasid Caliph al-Mustasim Billah ruled from 1242 to 1258 when Baghdad was attacked by Mongol ruler Hulagu Khan, and he defeated the Caliphate army. He captured the caliph and executed him by rolling him in a rug and ordering the horsemen to trample him, as they believed that the earth would be shaken and deadly earthquakes would follow if the sacred blood of the Abbasid caliph was spilled on the earth, as he was the descendant of Prophet Muhammad of Islam. To exclude the possibility of spilling the blood of the caliphs on the earth, he was wrapped in the rugs and then killed. The king who ate himself to death. Adolf Fredrik was an 18th century king of Sweden who is known to Swedish children as the king who ate himself to death. He ate a huge meal in February 1771, consisting of lobster, caviar, and sauerkraut, along with 14 servings of his favorite dessert, semla, a traditional Swedish sweet roll full of sugar and calories. Already obese, The greedy king succumbed to digestive problems and died, only to become the lead character in a cautionary tale to stop the children of Sweden from developing an unhealthy love of food. Feeling dishonored? A major domo is a person who speaks, makes arrangements, or takes charge for another. Typically, this is the highest-ranked person of a household staff, a head servant who acts on behalf of the owner of a large or significant residence. The major domo of Prince Louis II de Bourbon-Condé was responsible for a banquet for 2,000 people hosted in honor of King Louis XIV at the Château de Chantilly, where he died. According to a letter by Madame de Sévigné, Vatel was so distraught about the lateness of the seafood delivery and other mishaps that he committed suicide with his sword, and his body was discovered when someone came to tell him of the arrival of the fish. Deadly dancing. Jean-Baptiste Lully was a 17th-century Italian-French composer who was considered a master of the Baroque style of music and spent a lot of his working life in the court of Louis XIV of France. Performing a Te Deum, a form of Christian hymn, to celebrate King Louis's recovery from surgery, Lully struck himself in the foot with a long conducting staff. The foot became infected, and although doctors wanted to amputate it, the composer refused because it would mean that he could not dance anymore. Unfortunately, gangrene spread through Lully's body, infecting his brain and killing him. He died trying to prove life after death. In an attempt to ascertain the existence of an afterlife, the spiritualist Thomas Lynn Bradford committed suicide on 5th of February 1921 by sealing his Detroit apartment, blowing out the pilot of his heater, and turning on the gas, dying of carbon monoxide poisoning. Bradford had intended to communicate his findings to fellow spiritualist Ruth Starkweather Doran, but he never contacted her after his death. Some weeks after his death, the New York Times ran an article with the catchy title, "Dead Spiritualist Silent." He committed suicide while sleeping. Thornton Jones was a lawyer from Bangor, Gwynedd, Wales. One morning he woke up to find that he had his throat slit. Motioning for a paper and pencil, he wrote, "I dreamt that I had done it. I awoke to find it true," and died 80 minutes later. He had done it himself while unconscious. An inquest at Bangor delivered a verdict of suicide while temporarily insane.